Today, Open Source Security is talking to Charlie Eriksen. He's a security researcher at Aikido Security. Charlie wrote a bunch of blog posts during the NPM debacle that right before I hit record, we realized was like 2 months ago, only a month to 2 months, like which it feels like it's been years and years. But I jokingly told Charlie that his blog posts are what kept me sane during this event. So Charlie, welcome to the show, man. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks. And great to hear that somebody stayed sane during that because that was a tough month.
Oh, it was bananas. All right. So let's just start out. Tell us who you are, kind of tell us what you're doing, and tell us why you're here, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I'm Charlie Eriksen. I'm a security researcher, primarily working with Aikido Security. Basically, what I do these days is dealing with the fire hose that is supply chain security, open source security.
Yeah.
Basically, analyzing all of the stuff that all the code coming from all of the open source ecosystems, trying to catch all the bad stuff. Yeah.
And they're gigantic. It cannot be overstated how enormous these are. I have a handful of blog posts I've written where I take the data from ecosystems, ecosys.ms, Andrew Nesbitt's thing. He's been on the show. And when you look at all the graphs, they're all growing at an exponential rate. And there's like just literally tens of millions of packages now. It's completely bananas.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, so also just for background, since I think it's helpful, my background is actually more on the offensive security, but also teaching developers how to hack.
Nice.
So really going back into the more defensive side is a relatively new thing for me, even though, I did a startup during, basically teaching doors top 10 and things like that, working with developers, did a lot of source code review, helping development teams, how to build secure code and things like that. So for me, actually really diving this deep into the supply chain stuff is still something that I just started this year. But frankly, at the point in time we are in right now in the world, I'm really seeing how this is becoming really, really important because it plays into so many narratives across the world. And it's kind of scary once you step back and look at it, how big of a thing this is now that actually has a significant also geopolitical impact, unfortunately.
Yes. And okay, there's a lot to unpack there. But before we do, why don't you explain kind of the month of September to anyone who maybe doesn't know, which we'll assume most people in the modern times know, but we'll say for historical archival purposes.
Yes. The story of me almost burning out again. It started off with the NX breeds and singularity thing, more or less. I was sitting at Utrecht Station and I got a message from somebody on my team going, hey, there's something big going on. And it was all of the NX packages getting compromised. And NX is a package manager for like AI, something. And seeing, all right, because we kind of started to realize what was going on slowly, like, first there was these packages and it was doing all kinds of things that we really hadn't seen before, like stealing GitHub tokens, posting stolen data to GitHub in public repositories.
Yeah.
And then we started to see it change. We actually saw multiple variants of it that would also then start to turn private repositories in GitHub to public. And that was a really scary moment, actually, right? Because we're like, well, shit, what's going to be the ramifications of all this data being made public? And this kind of Robin Hood mentality of just like breaking and entering and just smashing everything.
Yeah.
And then like, is it going to continue? But soon after that, we had, I think, what was probably one of the most scary moments. Well, no, actually it wasn't. Spoiler alert.
It's coming.
When we then saw, I was one of the first ones to notice a bunch of really big packages on NPM, like debug and chalk, were compromised. Luckily, we managed to get that one under control really quickly because I happened to have a Blue Sky account, and the guy that was compromised, Josh Junan, managed to catch him at the right moment
I
where he saw
know.
it within like an hour or two. We did a really, I thought, really fantastic interview with Josh afterwards, talking about like the more human side. I really would recommend people watch about what actually happens when a maintainer like this gets compromised. So it was like 2.6 billion weekly downloads that all of these packages had.
Yes.
Right. I think by maintainer, he must be like one of the most downloaded maintainers out there, I would imagine. Wiz, they estimated that about 99% of their cloud environments used one of these packages.
Everyone had one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and 10% had a compromised version within hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we should add, that was like, what, 6 hours, I think, from start to finish, from the time you jumped in until NPM had basically gotten rid of all the malicious packages, which 6 hours is a pretty small window, really.
Yeah, but it was still quite a while after that Josh eventually got his account back and things like that. So
yes.
It was still messy. Now, this was one of those incidents, right, where we made a bunch of fun out of it afterwards, because like this was, by download count, certainly in sort of open source packets ecosystems, definitely the biggest. And we got really, really lucky, right? That week I spent hours talking to journalists. It was hectic as heck.
I can only imagine.
Because we got lucky in the fact that these attackers were too narrow-minded.
Yes.
Having the NX and Singularity situation in mind, given the scope of the impact, like of what was breached, if they had done something similar as what the Singularity guys did, I really don't even want to speculate about the implications of it.
It would have been ridiculous. Yes.
It would have been ridiculous. So we got really lucky. And this was a simple phishing attack, like very simple. And the fact that it took that little, and it took just catching the right guy at the right moment, I thought, like, no, this is ridiculous. We cannot be that vulnerable. Like, that is not okay. I got mad. And I wrote like some kind of scathing words in one of my blog posts of like, fuck, people, like this can't be allowed to happen again.
Right.
1 week later, I get pinged on Slack again. Something is going on. And sure enough, this was Shai Hulud.
Yeah, the big one.
Yeah. And this was the same attackers as Singularity. So it was the same deal of the malware, right? So they had compromised tokens, and I'm pretty sure it was tokens that they had left over from the first attack.
Sure.
I think. And it was uploading credentials onto GitHub. It was turning repositories public. There were some really cool techniques actually in both of them that I thought were novel, right? So in Singularity, they were trying to use local like LLMs and stuff like that to iterate your file system and find credentials. Very cool. It didn't really do a lot, I think. In the Shai Hulud thing, they tried to use Trufflelock, which again, legitimate tool, really great tool, open source, all that sort of stuff, to try to find credentials. Now, this is where it gets really scary. They also had a worm in there. Oh, and they had the GitHub Actions things to try to to persist and stuff like that. But I think that was kind of successful, actually. I think Git Guardian did a little bit of analysis on it, and it definitely worked. But the worm thing, that was the scary, because what it would do was that it would look for your NPM token in your environment. It would iterate all packages that you had access to, and it would take first it was top 10, but then they changed it to top 20 packages you had by download count. It would download the package, unpack it, put itself into it, update the package.json with a pre-install script, and then upload that.
And what does the pre-install script mean in this context?
Yeah, so NPM has what is called lifecycle hooks. So if you are a package that requires some sort of setup before you actually will work, like you need some dependencies or anything like that, you can define a script into package.json that will get run either pre-install, at install, or after installation. A lot of malware will use this, right? With callbacks and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, so it basically replicated itself, right? A completely classic worm. That's why it's also called Shai-Hulud, right? The repositories that it created on GitHub with your stolen stuff would call Shai-Hulud. Shai-Hulud is the worm from Dune.
Yes, which I love.
Yeah. And there I, like that day, I actually kind of was like beating myself a little bit because like with some journalists I had gone, if they had taken some of the concepts from like the singularity attack and done it at a larger scale and like smash and grabbed, we would have been in real trouble. And this became so close.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what was really interesting, we did a bunch of analysis of it afterwards. It turns out they actually seeded most of the compromised packages themselves.
Oh,
Because we
interesting.
could tell forensically in the packages, like in the new archives, because there were some bugs in their code.
Right.
So we could actually see that it was the attacker uploading most of the packages. An actual community spread was quite minimal. But now they have even more credentials.
Right, right.
Right? And you could tell from the timeline of things that they seeded a couple of packages, were hoping for it to catch on, didn't catch on. They also found out that they had some bugs in their code that just didn't work initially. So they kept trying to get it to actually start catching on, but didn't manage to do it.
I suppose it's probably pretty hard to debug a self-replicating worm in a way that doesn't get you banned, right?
Yeah, it is. But still, it was some really dumb mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. And you have a blog post about this, and I'll put links to all of Charlie's blog posts and all this, which again, like I said, I read them all while this was all ongoing, and they were incredibly helpful. So like, thank you so much for all that effort. I know it's a ton of work, but okay. That is a scary story. And I guess here's the thing I keep thinking of is this was like a month ago-ish, a little more for us in where we are right now. And I feel like an enormous amount of the world has been like, thank goodness that's done. And they've kind of gone back to normal. Would you agree with that or not?
One of the blog posts I wrote is we cannot go back to acting as business as usual.
Oh, and we can.
Frankly, I'll be the first one to say I've got ADHD. I am time blind. But I just think that we have way too short of an attention span.
I don't think we have a short attention span. I think this is so this is one of the challenges security people have actually. It's like it is a very human thing to ignore like very bad problems happening around us. We find ways to justify many things. I mean, this like climate change is the ultimate story here, where we've convinced ourselves it's fine for a variety of reasons. Yeah. And I think this is a similar story where it is not fine. We have been, I mean, obviously security people have been screaming about this for years and years and years at this point, but I don't know the impetus that is going to create the change here. And that's the thing that like terrifies me and worries me is I don't know if anything can happen that will be so bad we will actually change.
Yeah. And that's where we have a little bit of a shitty kind of dichotomy in terms of what will actually trigger change, right?
Yeah.
Because we got really lucky that this did not break mainstream news. If it had been slightly worse and actually caused like proper outages, like it could have in many cases, like think CrowdStrike kind of situation where suddenly systems are crashing.
Right, right.
It could have done that if it had spread more or had a larger reach.
Yes, yes. I mean, this is where I think breaking the barrier to like normal person news is maybe it's a good way to think about this, because like Log4j did that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd say there have been massive change, but I do think it drove maybe more attention. I think Heartbleed was a huge one, right? I remember when Heartbleed
Yeah.
happened, that drove, I mean, it drove a lot of interest. But again, I don't think we've seen massive change necessarily. But regardless, I don't want to
Yeah.
dwell on all this. Here's my question for you, since I have you here right now, is like, what are the things we can start thinking about that can make a difference in a context like this? Because when we're talking about like open source, the power of open source is just that like random people can do things in
Yeah.
the ecosystem, right? But at the same time, the downfall to this is random people can do things in the ecosystem, right?
Yes. Yeah. And this becomes a really difficult conversation, right? Because to me, there was a friend that pointed out to me from a more corporate perspective, sort of a regulatory or compliance perspective. When you develop software internally, right, you have a lot of requirements around how you do things.
Yep.
But an auditor is not going to come into your company and look at how you use open source other than maybe SBOMs and
Yep.
some stuff like that, and be able to have any opinion on it because it's outside of the scope of what they can say anything about, right? There's no way an
Yeah.
auditor is going to change, like, you can't use open source packages, right? That's ridiculous.
Oh my goodness, that would be
So,
hilarious.
yeah. So what it effectively is from if you assume that the standard should be what corporations have to do, then effectively open source could be argued to be trust washing, right? You're basically saying it is not made by us, so we can just ignore it.
Which is what they do.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, I have a funny story about that for you. Is there is a government program that I worked with at one point where they were taking open source software, they were taking commercial software, and obviously you had to justify security findings in the software,
Yeah.
the very normal thing. And one day I was like, oh, this problem is similar to that problem this open source thing had. Can you show me your justification for that? I want to understand what like how this worked out. The justification was it's open source. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. Like, you're making me do all this work and you're just giving open source a blanket like pass? They were like,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, I don't even know what to say,
Yeah.
But it happens.
It really does. So there is this problem. Like, to me, having had a lot of discussions around this, I think there are some really legitimate questions that almost goes counter to the whole kind of principle or ethos behind open source, which is, what is trust? And what does it require for you to have trust in something? And when it is random people on the internet, right now, trust is very hard to build, takes a long time, and very easy to lose.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just happen, like, once you start to lose trust in open source as a concept, which I think we could be going in that direction, things will have to change, and I don't know we'll like that change.
I don't think they will. And so there is a fellow I talk to on a pretty regular basis. Are you familiar with the blog post "I Am Not a Supplier" by Thomas Depierre?
No.
Okay, you should. I'll send it to you later. You should definitely read it. This happened during Log4j, but I talked to Thomas quite a bit. He's been on the show a couple of times, and he keeps bringing up a really good point every time I say things like what you just said about, oh, people are going to lose faith in open source, and his response is, no, they won't, because they want our free stuff. And so this comes back to that human ability to ignore problems of the free stuff of open source vastly outweighs any potential like cognitive trust issues I might have. The actual danger we have with open source is developers burning out because they get sick of all the crap, not corporations not trusting open source.
Yeah. But I also think that's not true. Because if we look at like the Josh Juna and Debug Chalk compromise, they also made mistakes and they broke build pipelines in many cases. So there is a cost to this in terms of cleanup.
Sure. Oh, yeah, yeah.
There is a cost so with some of the earlier breaches this year, like much smaller ones, I actually saw at least 2 projects that were compromised decide to go, no, I'm done with this. I am just going to deprecate the package and I'm going to, not going to maintain it anymore.
Yeah.
So now you had like fairly popular packages, like from an Aikido perspective, I saw we had a fair few customers use this. They now, to stay secure potentially, will have to go and rip out these packages and find something new. Like, and also just in terms of externalities, or if something does happen, well, the ultimate cost is on you, the corporation that actually decides to use this package. So yeah, you don't have an immediate cost. It is free, but you have a cost that could eventually come to fruition because of that decision. It is just latent in time.
It's technical debt, right? It's the typical technical
is.
debt problem. Just kick the can down the road till you can't kick it anymore, and then we'll deal with it, which is every tech company I've ever worked for. Ever.
Exactly.
I mean,
it's a time to market sort of cost benefit analysis. And I think it's reasonable that we came to this point, right? It makes so much sense. But let's at least have an honest look at ourselves and go, like, with so much changing in technology right now, I mean, I'm relatively young, right? I haven't seen this big of a transformation certainly in my lifetime, but I see what's happening with like AI, LLMs and stuff like that. And we are, in my opinion, seeing a seismic shift that I don't think we really comprehend yet, because we can make change in the world now at a pace and size that is frankly not possible for a human to comprehend.
Yes. Agree. Now I'm old, so I've seen a lot of things over the years, and yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It is the pace of change is incomprehensible now. We thought it was bad in the early 2000s. That is nothing compared to what we're dealing with right now. Yep. And I mean, this is part of the problem. Is like, I think this is part of the reason why we have Shai Hulud happen. Holy crap, the world is ending. And a month later, like, no one even remembers what that is. Right.
Yes.
Which is, as a security person, I don't know what to do about that. I don't think there's anything I can do, but it's also, it's like, it's frustrating to me, but also I've got my new fires to fight. So I'm like, whatever, good enough. I'll think about that some other day.
Exactly. And you can think about it some other day if everything goes slowly. Right. When you decide to upgrade your packages, that is not just done automatically, right? So what we are seeing now, and I think, again, trust here becomes a really interesting and relevant concept, because trust is built over time. Trust is consistency in doing what you say you're going to do over time. And I think P and PM, they hit the nail on the head very beautifully with the features introduced around the same time as, I think it was the whole Quicks debug chalk situation.
Yeah.
Where they introduced a setting that allows you to say, I am not going to install a package version if it is less than X amount of seconds old.
Right. Yep.
Right.
All right. For anyone who doesn't know, tell us what PNPM is.
It is a package manager. I forget if it's like a wrap around NPM or how it is, but it's basically an alternative to NPM for doing more sort of project or workspace or mono repos, basically. Yeah.
And it has some really cool security features.
Yes. Yeah, I was very impressed. Like those guys, huge props to them. They really, I think everybody should adopt this.
Yeah. And so from my perspective as a security geezer, I can tell you, if it's not like a default in the tool or it's not built into the technology, people just don't use it. I mean, This has been the story over, decades of security, is saying, oh, you should do this. And they're like, oh, sure, I'll do that tomorrow. And then tomorrow obviously never happens, versus if it's built into the tool, and especially if it's a default, then it creates change. And I think this is one of those examples where PNPM adding this ability is it's a game changer, quite frankly.
Yes. And what it does for us, it is that it slows everything down. And
Yeah.
the sort of the decision that we have to make, in my view, is either NPM and PyPy. Well, I'm saying mostly NPM because they are the biggest by a crazy magnitude.
Yes, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Either they have to really step up their game, and rather than having, well, whether it's Aikido and all of the 10,000 other startups and companies that are actively investing in this space to try to protect the ecosystem, they should engineer stuff to really, I mean, the amount of like really obvious stuff that they can catch with a regex, it's kind of ridiculous if you ask me. But I understand also from their perspective, and especially with the open letter from a lot of the ecosystems out there saying, "Hey guys, you're using this for free, basically, and you're expecting us to do stuff like when this is a cost center for us. Like, come on, this is not fair." And I understand that point fully. But at the same time, right, there's some stuff that just really needs to be done, and we need to figure out how do we do it. So either NPM and also ecosystems should probably do a little bit more to try to at least catch the most obvious stuff and add in defenses so that the really simple phishing stuff doesn't happen. To NPM's credit, I think they have taken some really great steps, but there's still a lot that I think can be done. The alternative is that if it's not in the pipeline of publishing a package directly on the sort of supply side, then you are relying on all of these companies that are doing this commercially to protect the ecosystem. And for that to really be effective, you need to slow things down to a point where the ecosystem has a chance to defend itself before spread can occur.
Okay, let me ask you the question I hear all the time.
Yes.
If we slow down and people aren't installing the latest and greatest as fast as possible, now how are we going to catch? Because the reason we catch the attackers quite often is there's like that, like just initial pool of victims that they get infected or whatever. And then we're like, oh, something's wrong, right? If everyone's waiting 2 weeks to install a package, whereas our initial, patient zero, so to speak, to figure this out.
Well, those are in the ecosystem of, well, how you would implement it is the default for everything would be anything less than a day old is not served by default. You have to opt in order to get those packages. So it would just be a flag saying, am I willing to, fly at the edge of my seat? Or do I want to be a little bit more conservative, right? 24 hours is not a lot.
That's
so the same mechanisms would still be valid, right? So, of course, we at Aikido, we basically pull all packages, right? For NPM, we will often front run the registry itself and start to pull packages before they're actually accessible.
Nice.
That happens really often because there's a big delay from when there's a notification on the chains stream until you can actually access it.
Yeah.
And we run the static analysis, right? We decided to do dynamic analysis. So we will catch most of that. Like I'm really happy with the detection rate that we have.
Nice.
Like even stuff like we detected a breach of the XRPL or Ripple sort of crypto package where they had like a backdoor that would exfiltrate private keys. And that is such a small change that can look really benign. But our stuff caught it. And I was like, wow. It was one of the first ones was like, actually, I wasn't 100% sold that this was actually doing what we were hoping, but it really does. So yeah, there's some stuff that is harder to detect and you really need to have more eyes on it. But by and large, like all of the really bad stuff, we know how to detect right now.
Sure.
As long as it doesn't change too much.
Okay. And so this is the attackers will adapt. Obviously, they always do.
Yeah.
But so you're saying right now that if we wait a day or two to install the latest update from something, the assumption is that there are companies like Aikido that are looking for malicious things. I know, like, I talked to Brian Fox from Sonatype a while back, and I know Sonatype is doing similar things in the Java ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what we're hoping will stop these attacks, is we will have defenders paying attention, then telling us, like, hey, don't use that. And then if we've waited 2 days, theoretically, we don't get wormed because the things that need to happen to clean up these messes will have happened by that time, which, I mean, that feels reasonable to me for the time being. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of other aspects and sort of side concerns to these kind of ecosystems and how you distribute code. There's a lot of like packages out there that will actually then, when you install it, it then goes and fetches a binary from GitHub.
Yep.
Like, come on, guys.
I mean, that's like how Python wheels work, right? Where they come with pre-built binaries inside of the wheel.
Yeah, but like if the actual package that you download from the registry is not the actual package.
Oh, you mean where it's like getting or curling something down?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's the worst. Agreed.
Right? And it also speaks a little bit to sort of the concerns from the NPMs and PyPys of the world of like, hey, we're basically a big old CDN for you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we need to be able to reason about where software comes from. And if that is not the package that you download, and if it's going and fetching additional code that is not immutable, we've got big problems because we can't reason about security then.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of other ways that still you start to run into problems where we won't be able to detect it because they can change behavior of code through a side channel. Where it's like, okay, they just like don't turn on the endpoint for 24 hours and then it will pass right through.
Right.
So,
which is a conversation. Let's save that one for another day. But yes, that is a fascinating problem in itself, is some of the crazy things that we see. So, okay, Charlie, we've come to the end, and I'm not feeling real optimistic right now.
No.
So give me the optimism I need in your closing.
Okay, so I do also want to tag on for next time, talking about obfuscated code.
Oh, yeah.
That's a delicious topic.
Yes.
Commercial software on public open source registries. The really optimistic thing from my perspective is I've seen NPM take really big and quite bold steps.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of chatter on LinkedIn, especially when they announced their initial thoughts on what they were going to do, where I saw people going like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is way too, like, things are going to break. And I'm like, well, yeah, this is going to maybe be a little bit painful, but I think it's the right thing to do because you have to change status quo. So I'm actually really happy that this ruffled feathers, that people are like, no, you can't do this. I think that's a sign that it had to be done.
Yeah. I mean, it's the old, if no one's complaining about what you're doing, you're not doing anything interesting, right?
Exactly. Now, is it enough? That is the big question.
No, it's not.
It's not, but at least we are seeing that people are willing to change things and actually have a conversation about this. I think having conversations is one of the big tools that we have about this, because how do you change public opinion? We talked earlier about, like, if this had broken mainstream news, first of all, it would have been incredibly embarrassing for us as a industry, right? This just looks bad in every single way you can reason about it.
I feel like we're pretty shameless at this point, so.
Yeah, well, okay. I'm not sure that's a good thing. We maybe should have a little bit more shame. But the way that you change, like, the way that the world changes is conversation, and starts chatting with your friend over a cup of coffee or something like that. And as people open and change perspective through, like, oh, I hadn't considered looking at it this way. or like, oh, things could be different, that will start to disseminate into the public consciousness and go like, oh yeah, maybe we need to change something. It actually would be much better for everybody. Because there are so many things also that are not great now, like talking about like mental health aspect of like, especially like the Josh Junan conversation. Yeah, we are kind of being a little bit masochistic to ourselves. And I think there are ways where things will have to change that will just be much better for everybody. It won't be easy, right? We will have to change our ways. But I think we're slowly starting to realize like we are rethinking basically how the world works anyway. So I think we will start to see that more as long as the whole dead internet thing doesn't actually just really make all conversation pointless. Wow. I was supposed to be optimistic. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's what the coffee shop part was for. Like, go talk to people in real life, not on the internet.
Yes, I love it. I think I've seen so many just conversations change things on a small scale and start to ripple out into the real world. That's where I see optimism. It is human connection.
That's fair. I agree with this. And I think you're reminding me of something I forget all the time, but I say it all the time as well, is that as security people, we are notorious for saying it's not perfect, so it's worthless. And this is one of those examples where it's going to be 7,000 tiny steps.
Yeah.
And eventually, like, we won't even realize when things have finally started to change because it's going to feel like nothing's going on. But you are right. Like NPM, even PyPy, Jot Maven, all of these repositories are doing things. It's just, it's not always obvious and it doesn't always feel effective. But in a couple of years, hopefully we look back and be like, holy crap, can you believe that even happened?
Yeah.
So there's hoping, man. All right, Charlie.
This
has been a treat, man. I truly appreciate the time.
Great chat.
Yeah. And thank you for all the work you do. Keep writing those blog posts. Like, keep me sane, man. I love it.
Well, I would rather prefer not to be honest, because it means I've had a really bad time.
Okay.
But I'll do it for you.
I love it. All right. Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thanks.